John Okoyen, you are the CEO of Rooter Hero Plumbing and Air. Welcome back to the Toolbox for the Trades.
Thank you. Good to be here, Jackie.
I am so excited to have you back again. I'm going to read off a little bit about who you are, what you're doing. So, you are the CEO of Rooter Hero Plumbing and Air, the largest residential plumbing company in California. We're going to talk about that. And also one of the first guests I've ever had on Toolbox for the Trades. I always kick off the podcast with asking my guests, how did you get into the trades? But we actually already know your origin story. You became a plumber at 17 to support your family and have been working at this ever since. So, the last time we spoke, which was right before COVID, by the way,
Yeah.
Rooter Hero was a $50 million business. What's changed?
Well, a lot's changed. We've nearly doubled the size of the company, which is pretty amazing. Did really good through COVID. And opening up locations, so we've expanded a little more on our reach. And currently I'm in the middle of opening up 3 more.
Oh, my goodness.
So it's just a lot of exciting things going on right now. I mean, it just took off a lot faster than I thought. I mean, I thought it's going to, the bigger you get, the harder it's going to get. But it's actually, I'm having more time to work on the business now, which is pretty incredible. I really enjoy it.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, lots changed. But there's things that are still the same, too. I mean,
Well, what's still the same?
well, we're still doing drain cleaning and plumbing, and
Sure.
we added HVAC just recently, so now we're getting into that market as well. So, yeah, I mean, the day-to-day business things have been the same. The philosophy is the same. Our values are the same. So there's just a lot of things that are just the same at Hero Land.
That's all. You always call your business Hero Land whenever I talk to you about it. Let's actually just get that out of the way. When did you start calling it Hero Land? And does everyone at the company call it Hero Land?
Yeah, we all call it Hero Land because we believe it's the happiest place on earth next to the other,
The other happiest place on earth in
Yeah.
California?
This one's for adults, though.
Sure.
So we enjoy the place, and it's just sort of our internal dialogue.
Nice. That's awesome. I actually really like that. I feel like at Service Titan, we have our own internal lingo. And it's so interesting how, as you develop a culture, as you build a business, you kind of develop this only almost its own language to speak about what it's like there, right? I'm kind of getting off on a tangent, but I think that's really cool.
Yeah, it's fun.
So you've doubled your business since we last spoke, which was right before COVID. And I just want to highlight how incredible that is, especially during a pandemic. And now, as I alluded to at the beginning of the conversation, you were the largest residential plumbing in California. How the heck did you do that?
I've always enjoyed, growing. I like working on the business. I like starting things. I'm not like the kind of guy that likes to finish it, but I
Oh my
do.
gosh, we have that in common. I'm the
Yeah.
same.
But I love to start things. So I'm like, I always like get the first, 20% going, and then my team picks up and, they keep it going. And I think we just kind of been lucky too.
Nice.
You know,
How
so
many locations do you have to be the largest residential plumbing company in
so currently
California?
we have 11 locations, and we've got 3 more in the works. So we'll probably be at about 14. And now we're looking at going into, neighboring states too. So, hopefully we are in Arizona. We're in Phoenix. So
And you're looking at Nevada just like slowly creeping up towards the middle of the country?
yeah, I mean, just there's only enough markets in California where, you'd have to go out further. So we're looking at same time zones, because that's important because we have a shared services,
Mm.
and a lot of it's like interacting with one another. So the time zone thing is kind of important. And then I like to get to the location. So one thing I look for is how easy can I get to it?
Oh, sure.
So it has to be something where you could easily travel and get to it without having to, I like to come back home and sleep in my bed nowadays instead of being out on the road for so long.
Totally. I love that you just said that as an owner, it's still really important for you to be able to visit those different locations.
Yeah.
And I wonder how often entrepreneurs in the service industry consider that as they're expanding.
That was kind of important to me from even the beginning days because of my family. I just, like to come home and have dinner with the boys and my wife, and we sometimes read books together, and so it's been important to me from the beginning. But in the beginning days when we were expanding, I was spending a lot more time, like in hotels and stuff like that. But nowadays, it's actually, I get home, I leave in the morning really early. Like I went Actually, this week on Wednesday, I was in Reno. So I
Oof.
left at my house at 4:30 in the morning, and by 6:30 p.m., I was having dinner at home. So
I mean, that works. I have done that Reno to Los Angeles road trip though, and
yeah,
it's tough.
yeah.
So I want to get into all the ways that you were able to double since the pandemic, how you became the largest residential plumbing company in California. So tell me a bit about the internal infrastructure you had to build within HeroLand to support this extreme growth.
So we have a shared service type of model where we call it the hub. Where we have a call center, we have evening dispatching, we have an accounting team there, we do our payroll out of there. We got an HR function, we have a legal team, and just some executives that work out of there too. Anybody that's working on, and within the last couple years, we put a compliance department now in place where we're making sure that we cross all their T's and dot all the I's and make sure that everything is compliant. So it's sort of like I think we might have 70 employees, that work within that infrastructure, and then they cater to only our companies. So then on the front line, we have we call them entrepreneur like general managers, which
Mhm.
are guys that love to build businesses as well, but they don't have to risk their own dollar. We'll write the checks and they can help us grow it, and they get a little bit of equity in the company, and it keeps them happy, and they love building. So and they run a operation, and they make a lot of the decisions day to day, and they're facing the front line, so they have a lot of the technicians, and some of them have some office staff that report to them as well, to help keep things organized. But that's kind of, it's like a big wheel with a bunch of the hub in the middle and then a bunch of spokes coming out, and we keep wanting to add more and more spokes.
I love that. I've heard about this model. I think I first heard about it maybe, I'm going to say 40 episodes ago, which was this shared service model. And you have different branches and you select a really entrepreneurial, go get 'em kind of person to run those branches.
Yeah,
And you take all the risk out of it. And I think it's such a brilliant way for you to identify go getters in the company who may one day become your competition. And instead, you're providing them with the growth opportunities they want internally so they don't leave and they get the rewards of being a business entrepreneur without really having to take the risks. I think that's so cool.
yeah, and then also having networking amongst them, because iron sharpens iron, and you have a great group of people, and they're always like, you know, helping each other out, and they're doing the same thing, and a lot of them, are just try different things, and if it works, they share it with others. So it's just a really good internal kind of like infrastructure where you just get better and better by the day, because the group's getting better, and then they're sharing with one another, and that's how I've learned too, because I've always been part of like a performance group with other trades and stuff like that as
Hmm.
well, and that's really helped me, and I know it's also helping internally our team.
Awesome. I would love to know how long have you had this model in place, by the way?
Well, I mean, before Hero Land, we had this. I was in the franchise. I was a franchisee for a larger franchise company, and I kind of built the same infrastructure within that company as well.
Mm.
So I kind of learned it and tried it out and expanded outside of just our backyard, and learned the model. And then with Hero Land, I just kind of already had done it, so I knew what to do. And when we started back in 2011, it just was very simple to figure out that infrastructure and then just keep on using that model to grow.
I love that. What would you say to any contractors who are hearing about this model, who have heard it at other best practice organizations, at other conferences, and they're like, yeah, I'm really interested in that? What kind of advice would you give for them if they wanted to set that up?
Well, I mean, it only works if you hire people that have batteries included, right?
Yeah, sure.
So, you're going to have people that are, willing to, like be resourceful, create their, be self motivated, self energized, and sort of that entrepreneurial like spirit where somebody could come in and they want to grow, and they want to build something big. And so it works when you have those type of people that are helping you build those infrastructures. I've had the other side where I thought somebody was really good, but they were really not entrepreneurial. They just wanted something that was already going on. They didn't want to build anything. They wanted something that was built that they could just manage. That doesn't really work good in our model. Sometimes it does because we have some divisions that require that, but for the most part, it requires somebody that's willing to roll up their sleeves and, help us build a business.
I'm thinking about a business book, and I can't remember the name of it. Maybe you can help me out. It's by a woman, and it talks about the difference between rock stars and like everyday boots on the ground workers. And a big thing to do as a leader is to identify who are the people in your organization who constantly need new challenges, which is what I think entrepreneurs do.
Yeah.
And who are the people that are really happy mastering a craft and just being really good at that. Does that align with the experience you had?
Sort of. Yeah, sort of. I mean, at the same time, somebody that's willing to, fail and keep going kind of deal, and not let that bother them, like just get up and keep going. Because, when you're starting a new location or a new business, there's just a lot of failures in the beginning. A lot less now. A lot less now than it was before because we've learned so many things. We learned a lot of things not to do.
Sure.
It's just got to be somebody that's willing to keep going, and it's also about building a team and then having that person build a team within a team, and be able to manage that team as well. So.
Got it.
Yeah.
Are all of your entrepreneurs, are they all former service technicians?
Some of them are. Some of them have grown within the company. Some of them have come from outside the company. But we look within the walls. That's usually where we look first. And then if we can't find anybody that's ready for a challenge or is ready to move to a location or something like that, then we'll look from the outside.
I got it. I'm throwing you so many questions I didn't prep you with, and you're
No, it's
handling them
okay.
beautifully because I'm just really interested in this entrepreneur model. My final question about it is building teams within a team. So you have the hub that you have 70 employees at, and then you have all these spokes that are different locations. What do you do to make sure that there's cohesion among the different spokes?
So, I mean, a lot of what we do when we're bringing people in is, we'll talk about our values. We'll talk about the type of company it is. And even in our ads, I mean, we just place some new ads and we'll talk about not only like before we used to put all the good things in the ads, right? And now we're putting like the good things, but we're also putting in what the expectations are and what the company culture is like, because not everybody likes a entrepreneurial culture. Not everybody likes that type of thing. So we put all the good, but we also put the bad in there too. And we do put in there the compliance measures and all the things that people have to do as well. And I think that's kind of what it takes. Being honest with people, telling them what to expect, so they're not coming in with this expectation of, oh, everything's going to be great. This is what it is. And then all of a sudden they hit their first hiccup, right? And they're like, oh, I didn't sign up for this,
Yeah, and I mean that must be such a fine line to toe, right? Because the trades is always looking for fresh talent because there's a hiring crisis. We talk about it all the time on this podcast.
Yeah.
But you also want to be brutally honest about what actually is in it for them. So I imagine the copy in those WAN ads, or not WAN ads, but those online postings most likely has to really toe that line between being inspirational but also realistic, so you're targeting the right people.
Yeah, and one thing I love to do is communicate with my team every day. So every morning I'll send out a message to all of our people, like a nice quote with an action behind it. And we're in constant communication through just GroupMe, or WhatsApps and stuff like that. So we have like these group chats and stuff, and I'm always participating and on there, and I'm very accessible too. So I put my cell phone number on our website, behind every business card. I'm reachable by every employee, So sometimes I'll get a call from an employee, and they might not be happy about something, and I'll go back to, either HR or their manager. I'll try to figure out what it is and help them get through it, So, you got to be accessible. I know there's a lot of CEOs that, don't want to be bothered or, don't want to be called or hard to get a hold of. But I try to make myself accessible to our company customers and also our internal heroes as well, if they need anything from me.
I can verify that yes, you can find John's cell phone on the website. I apologize for any crank calls you might get as after this airs, but I love that approach. And do you get as many calls as you think, as someone may think you do?
Not really. I
That's so
don't.
interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's you think that your phone would ring off the hook, but it really doesn't. I mean, I do get some calls that are just solicitors and stuff like that, but
Hmm.
it happens. I mean, I get spam calls on my cell phone all the time.
I don't, yeah, don't we all?
Yeah.
I guess it just further highlights that people just really don't like talking on the phone.
No, you're right. I mean, more and more people like to be, and I even on my message I put down, look, just text me, please. If don't leave me a voicemail because I
Oh my
don't like
gosh.
listening to them.
Oh my gosh. No, my voicemail is perpetually 90% full.
Yeah, I
And
try not to delete it so there's no space for another one, right?
yeah, same, same. I love the entrepreneur shared services model, and I really think that's a cool strategy to grow and to expand while also maintaining a finger on the pulse of the business, right? I know that one thing that has really helped you grow too is your peer group. So tell me about that.
Well, yeah, the peer group I used to belong to.
Mm,
So we had a group of contractors that would meet every week. I mean, just an incredible group, and we called us the family group. And a lot of them have already sold their businesses to private equity, and as that happened, more and more got out of the group, and so there was 8 of us before, and I think it's just me and one other guy that we still own our own businesses. But the benefit of that group was incredible. I mean, I would get on the phone every week at a pre-marked time, and we'd just get into a 1-hour conversation. And I just learned so much. I mean, these guys were just so smart, ran a really good business, and it's just beneficial to be around people like that, because you learn so much,
yeah.
when you're around people that are running a really good business and have good moral ethics, and they're trying hard, and it's just and they have they're in the same trade, in different areas. Some of them were on the East Coast, some of them were in California in the same areas, but we would like we had a common agreement. One of the agreements was that we were not going to hire each other as employees.
Mm,
um, so there was a code of conduct, that we had to all agree on. um, and then there was shared values as well. I mean, we all kind of were sharing the same type of values. And then as soon as we were in the group, or people would get in the group, it was like a brotherhood. It was
mm.
just amazing. I mean, we'd travel together, go to different companies together. We'd go to somebody's company and like split up and meet with their team members and ask questions and help them, like figure out what are some of the bottlenecks. And then we'd bring the owners in and we'd communicate with them and tell them this is what we learned, and this is what your team is telling us. They might not be telling you, and
Oh, wow.
this is what this is what we believe you should be doing to kind of like keep growing your business. So it's just, and by doing those kind of things, I was like, even though I was at somebody else's company doing it, I was like learning, because I'm like, hey, this is going on in my company as well, right? So it just a lot of great things coming out of a peer group.
It was like you were doing real life undercover boss almost.
Almost, yeah,
Almost.
almost, yeah.
And how did you get set up with the peer group?
So a friend of mine that I met through an organization I used to go to was in that group. I was in another group, and that group kind of was like, it kind of fell apart.
Sure.
So I called him up and I said, "Hey, I want to join the group that you guys are in." And he's like, "Well, there's some criterias about joining the group," and our criterias were. I got in because the criterias were, okay, you have to be at 30 million in revenue or more, double-digit EBITDA, and what we would do, well, the guys in that group I knew, but anybody new that would come in, a couple people would go to their company, would interview them, and kind of spend a day with them,
Mm.
talk to some of their staff. We'd get we'd do an NDA, get their financials, and take a look at that. And then we'd meet as a group and go, do we really want this company in our group? Can we provide value to these people? and will they provide value to the group? So those were the kind of conversations we were having. And if the answers were yes, they were in. If the answers were no, it was hard to get in. It was like,
Exclusive club.
yeah,
But I guess, I mean, when you're running a business and you're trying to grow at the rate that you are at now, when you're talking about, tens of millions of dollars, you have to take something like that seriously. You can't just partner up with whoever says, "How about me?" I would imagine that running a business like that, your time is so valuable that
yeah,
you really have to do that legwork to ensure that the person you're going to work with, you're going to be co-mentors, co-peers with each other. You really want to make sure you're getting in bed with the right people, for
yeah,
lack of a better metaphor, obviously.
yeah, yeah.
Wow. So you mentioned, how long were you in that group?
Oh, many years. I think we were probably good 6 or 7 years.
Wow.
Until it just kind of like one at a time. I mean, it happened really quickly because I guess private equity came into our businesses and
Mm.
thought the model was
Just like
great.
when all your friends start getting married at the same time.
Yeah, all of a sudden you're like, hey, well, am I the only single guy here? So it just happened really quick, and but it was a great run. I mean, I learned so much, and we used to travel together. And one of the things I remember, we all went to Washington D.C. to look at this software or this technology that we all thought would be great to implement in our business. So we met with them and went over it. And one of the guys in the group knew another contractor that was in Washington D.C. And he said, "Hey, I set up a date to go, check out this really large contractor. He's $150 million,
Whew.
HVAC and plumbing company." We're like, "We're all in. Let's go. Just for that, we'll go. Just to meet him and see." And I met the owner of Michael and Son, Bassam.
Oh, yeah.
Great guy. Became good friends with him until today. We either text each other or meet up, and I've gone back to his office many times. And so you meet so many great people. Like when you're with great people, you meet a lot. You meet other great people.
Mm-hmm.
So um, just a lot of good things happen being in that group. So I highly recommend it. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I'm curious I know you mentioned you learned so much. Is there any single lesson that really comes to mind right now in terms of, oh yeah, when I joined that group, I realized I was doing something totally wrong, or maybe I realized I was doing something totally right. Was there a particular aha moment that you remember?
Yeah. I mean, there was a lot. I know, like, I've always been sort of the quiet one. Sort of like the fly on the wall. I like
Mm.
to listen a lot. Um, but what I learned being in the group is you have to be totally honest. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable. Like, put your problems out there, because most of the times we don't put the problems out there is because our ego is telling us that we're going to look weak,
Mm.
or we're not going to, it's people are going to judge us or whatever it is. So the more honest I got and the more vulnerable I got and the more I was willing to share my issues and challenges, the more I was getting from the group. So um, I guess, I learned that early on, coming into the group, and I just learned a lot from it. I mean, I was not the smartest guy in the room for sure. There was so many smarter guys than me. I felt like I was, one of the luckiest guys to be in that room. But I just learned a lot from them. They were all and until today, they're all great entrepreneurs, run an incredible business, and yeah,
That's great.
and still in contact with a lot of them.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Was that vulnerability in the group, was that modeled for you by the other members?
I mean, all of the members, shared that honesty and just brought that to the table. I feel like they were all like, really cared about one another and were willing to be vulnerable. They were willing to open up their books. They were willing to talk about what they weren't good at, as much as they were willing to talk about what they were great at. So I felt like it was a very safe environment, to just, put your problems out there. Nobody's going to judge. Don't worry. They're all there to help, and just a great group of guys. Yeah.
That's awesome. We mentioned this before we started recording that I'm a big psychology nerd, and I Brene Brown has this wonderful anecdote about how you should only listen to critiques or criticism or feedback from folks that are in the arena with you, that are at that level, that are facing the same challenges you have, or rather who have had the courage to take the risks and accept the challenges that you have.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important to cultivate that sense of honesty, of safety you mentioned too, when you're in those peer groups. So something for folks listening to consider if they're working with peers and maybe they don't feel that sense of safety, or if they do, recognize how wonderful that is.
Definitely. Yeah, it is.
Awesome. So you mentioned already, most of those folks from your peer group have been acquired by private equity. They got the red rose for The Bachelor, but you're not interested in that at this moment. And PE is something we talk about so much on the podcast.
Yeah.
So I was hoping you could share your point of view and enlighten the audience as to why at this point you're not interested in this.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I just never felt like it was the right time. And I've always worked, like on my own since I was like 19. I started my first company, and I've always kind of felt like I always answered to somebody. Like I was, I had to, be there for my people, and I had to serve them. And I felt like, even though, they reported to me, I felt like I had an obligation to them, right? So there was always that. But I guess, I've always had the fear of the unknown, like what does it feel like, to, be acquired and now, have a board of directors that you're reporting to, or somebody else that owns majority of the company, And I don't know. I guess, sometime soon we'll do it, and we'll have to do it, and we'll, probably keep growing and, making it outside of California and maybe making it nationwide, So I think there is a benefit to it for sure. But I just never felt the urgency to do it.
That's fair. Imagine if in this moment I pulled off a mask and I was one of the private equity people that I'm sure have been trying to take you out to dinner for many years. Um, I like that you said that you feel like an obligation to others, an obligation to your team. And I think it's really interesting just talking about the entrepreneur in general, how while you feel that obligation to your team, you're not so eager to trust other people with that obligation because it is so important. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. What do you think? So you think you're just going to kind of play it cool for the next few years and see what happens?
No, I mean I'm still exploring. I mean I'm talking to people, and I'm not like, it's not like no, it's a deal breaker. I mean either way, I know that we're going to continue to build Hero Land, and it's going to be a very successful business. I believe in that. I believe that this is my calling, and that whatever I'm doing, I was put on the earth to do, So, so I don't know. I mean, we'll see what happens.
That's okay. You could.
Yeah.
I don't know is a perfectly fine answer. Also, I didn't realize. I mean, I know you got into the trade super young, but first business at 19. That I was. I wanted to interrupt you and go show off. So I just wanted to share that. So we talked about your peer group. We talked about your entrepreneur shared services model, which is all stuff I wanted to talk about. Now I want to get a little bit to you because I know you're really into personal development, which is such a theme when I talk to service entrepreneurs or just folks that maybe don't have the title of CEO or founder, but are just really interested in growing themselves. What are you trying to learn more about right now?
Well, I mean, right now, I've always been a health fanatic, so I'm trying to learn, and I hit 50 this year.
Mazel tov, you look 36.
Thank you. So I'm learning about age reversal. So I'm trying to do what I can to stay young and stay energetic, so I could continue to do what I love, which is plumbing and HVAC, and I guess that's the first thing, because my dad died when I was 17, and I want to make sure that I could live as long as I can to enjoy my kids and family and the people I work with, and so that's the priority. I'm learning a lot about that, but I'm also learning about HVAC businesses. I'm learning about private equity. I've been researching that a lot to see what's that about, M&A, things like that. So
all the fun acronyms that you can throw around at conferences, so people are like, oh, he knows what he's talking about. Do you still actually get in and do manual labor as it pertains to plumbing and HVAC these days?
It, funny that you asked. So my wife's friend called the other day and said her gardener turned off her water, and it was like 8 o'clock at night, and I had just got back from Reno, and I said, "Don't worry, I'll be there to take a look at it." I called my office, and they're like, "All the techs are busy. We could probably get somebody there by 10 o'clock." It was about a couple miles away, so my wife's like, "Okay, I'll go with you." So we went over. She just bought a house. She's a first-time home buyer, and the gardener turned off the water, so I was able to fix it for her, that evening and get her water back on, and she was happy. But before that, I was out in the field with the guys during COVID. When COVID happened, we had a lot of guys that didn't want to go out in the field. They were kind of afraid, and I didn't blame them because you don't know, what's going on. And so I threw my uniform on and I got in a service truck and I started taking service calls, and I encouraged our team. I said, "Listen, if we're out there to be heroes, we got to be on the front lines." And I'm on the front lines with everybody else, and everybody else just put their protective gear on and went out and served customers. And it was a really good time because I really enjoyed it. I spent several weeks in the field and fixed a lot of plumbing, and and had a great time with the people out in the field. A lot of the customer interactions, and then dealing with the techs. We were doing TV commercials back then too, so it was funny. I went into somebody's house and they're like, "You're the guy on TV, like you're in my house fixing it, and you're the guy." I'm like, I'm in the field today." So it
That's
was,
so funny.
yeah,
I'm so happy I asked that question. It's like, wait, your face is on the website. It's like,
yeah,
yeah, well, got to do it, got to show my team, which speaks to, I think, also, even though you're a CEO role, even though largest residential plumbing company in California, it's still so important to potentially go out there if you still can and work with the guys, get on the ground floor, and just make sure you're touching the business at every level.
yeah, definitely.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. So, you have a new book out, and the first time you came on the podcast, we talked about your original two books. So, the new book is called Temporarily Broken, and I would love it if you could tell me a little bit about it.
So originally, I wrote this book for my kids. It was sort of like something I wanted them to know about their father, and also their ancestors. Their great grandparents and grandparents, and some of the accomplishments, mainly the struggles that I went through. Um, a lot of it was to tell them, here's what not to do, right? This is all the stuff you shouldn't do. And I finished the book. It was something I wanted to give them, and as I was doing it, like a lot of people that I work with were kind of interested, and they're like, "Hey, we want to read about that story as well." And so I eventually put it out on Amazon, and started to share it with other people. And there's a chapter about Service Titan, when it started, and how I was part of it in the beginning, and how I feel like that was one of the greatest contributions I think I made to the trades, even though I wasn't the one that created Service Titan. I was there to, be the first customer, and help them see what needs to be developed and stuff like that. So, yeah, I mean, I guess it's a good story if people want to read about, you know.
It is a great story. I mean, you really, I kind of glossed over it at the intro because it is a bit of a sad story. But when you were a teenager, when you were 17 years old, your dad died and you had to help your mom. And so you got into plumbing. And then now you've turned it into a tens of, I don't even know, how do you say multi-million? Well, it's 150 million now, right?
No, we're not quite there yet.
Okay, not quite there yet. Sorry.
We we're approaching 100, so we're
Almost $100 million business.
yeah.
So, I mean, just being able to do that and, make that transition and go through what I'm sure was a really tough time and come out of it the other end, such a successful person, it's a wonderful story.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So is there anything else in there that you would really like to share with the folks listening right now without
Well,
giving too
no,
much
I
away?
mean, I've kind of, you talk about being vulnerable. I've exposed a lot of skeletons, and from my past, and through the dark sides that I went through, and the struggles I've had, and how I came out of it, and how it's helped me become a better person. And my wife being one of the people that are one of those angels that came in and helped me become better. And I have to give it to her. I think it's so important. And I tell my boys that it's so important to, like find your soulmate, somebody that's going to make you better. And she's done that to me, so there's a chapter on her in there. How we started Rooter Hero is in there as well, and a little bit about Service Titan as well. And,
That's
just,
awesome.
yeah.
I love it when folks shout out their partners or spouses on this podcast. It happens actually quite a lot, which I think is just a testament to how to run a business like this. It's definitely not a one-person job.
No.
If you've got a family, that family has to be bought in as well, and you have to figure out a way to manage the manage time between both of them, right?
Yeah, well, I always say that, my wife and my kids are my first love affair, and my employees and Rooter Hero and Hero Land are my second love affair. So I try to cater to both, because I'm either there or there,
Got it. Got it. Is there any other advice you'd like to give contractors listening to today's episode?
Well, I mean, if you're looking at putting together a performance group or a group of other contractors to learn from, just find people that are share the same values that you can open up with, and just surround yourself with better people, and you'll become better.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just the law of the averages, right? You become the average of the people that you hang out with. So that's all there is. Yeah.
Got it. Actually, would you mind reiterating your values? Because I know we spoke about them on your very first episode, and you've mentioned them several times. I think it would be helpful for the listener for you to ground them in what your values are.
Yeah, our first value is faith, integrity, respect, service, and teamwork. And we have a couple of sentences in between all of that kind of describes what we mean. But those are our values.
That's excellent. So, who else should I have on this podcast? I've talked, you're now going to be, well, you're technically a revisit. Ken also was a revisit. So I've technically had 99 contractors on this podcast. Who do you think would be a great person for me to interview next?
Well, I mean, I think that if you can get Bassam on here from Michael and Son, I mean, he's just an incredible human being, and he's super smart, and he's built a really big business. I'm sure he has a lot of nuggets to share. Also, I mean, my call center manager, David, who also runs our podcast called Hero Talk, he wrote a new book about call centers. He wrote the Blue Collar Call Center, and he just finished and published it. And he's a really good guy to have on the podcast as well, because he'll talk about how he changed the culture of our call center and how he made it better, and how they're booking at a higher rate, and they've got this, incredible culture going on in there. So yeah, those are a couple people that I think.
That's awesome. I mean, yeah, sell David. That sounds great. Hero Talk, is that an external podcast or is it just for internal employees?
No, it's external as well.
Amazing.
It's internal and external.
Tell us about it. Why should people listen?
Well, he runs it. I've been a guest on it a few times, but he runs it, and it's just very short, to the point, and we talk about kind of what we're doing at Hero Land. It's mainly about how we're building the culture and how important that is.
Yeah.
And how we work on it every day. It's just because you have to be purposeful about it. You have to be intentional, because if you're not, then you might end up with a culture that you don't like.
I love that. What kind of culture are you trying to build right now?
Well, we're building a culture of people that enjoy coming to work. We're building a culture of people that feel safe to take risk, that will go out there and try new things, and just mainly that. I mean, I love working with people that don't pull me into the weeds, and and just keep it brief and to the point, So it's David is sort of our culture hero, and kind of works on that and communicates that through the podcast a lot.
I love that. I also really like what you just said about, I love people that don't pull me into the weeds. I love my job at Service Titan. I love working on this podcast. But if I ever were to apply somewhere else, I would say I'm the type of worker who likes to try to solve the problem before she comes to you. And I think that I would just get so many acceptances as someone who's been managing people for a little bit myself. I think that is so important and such a high value item for employees to consider as they're going into new spaces, right?
Yeah.
All right.
definitely.
I want you to just let you know, you have given a fantastic interview. We've been going back and forth. It's been like a lovely tennis match. I'm going to now give you the question that I know you don't necessarily have an answer to, but we'll see what happens. If you had to pick a song to be the soundtrack of your life, what would it be?
Yeah, that's a hard one because I listen to more audiobooks than music, but also I still love music, but I don't really pay attention to the words as much.
Sure.
Just love. Um, I'd have to say, "World Hold On" by Bob Sinclair. I mean, when that song comes on, it just, the beat is so good, and I love some of the words that come out of it. So it's almost kind of like spiritual. So I guess I would say that.
What you see, you had a song, you got one, you pulled
Yeah,
one out.
I pulled one out.
Awesome. I'm so happy. Thank you for sharing that. John Okoyan, it was lovely to chat with you again. Thank you so much for coming back on Toolbox for the Trades. Everyone listening, check out what's going on with Hero Land and check out John's new book, Temporarily Broken. Thanks, John.
Thank you.